I want to introduce you to our staff and board at the network. I introduced myself, and Tana is going to give us a land acknowledgement and an acknowledgement regarding Black reparations in a moment. We also have two co-chairs, Gabe Shoeships, board co-chair, and Clinton Bagley, who you may know. Our other board members include Nabeen Damal, Keta Gonzalez, and Michael Pope. As the board has taken shape and as we've been in contact with stakeholders, we've begun to realize that we exist to invest in and catalyze action in three main areas of work. And we see these three areas as interdependent and interrelated, and that is forests, water, and people. And so that's what brings us here today. We don't want to just engage in riparian restoration. We certainly do that. We don't want to just engage in the enhancement of aquatic habitat. We certainly do that and will continue to do that. But we also want to start thinking about equitable outdoor access. We want to be thinking about how to create a safe space in Oregon's lands so that people feel free to be and roam in nature. Before I introduce the speakers and the moderator for this event today, I want to kick it over to Tana Ashley Culbertson, my colleague, and she's going to give a land acknowledgement and an acknowledgement for Black reparations. Tana?
Thank you, Jesse. Welcome, everybody. My name is Tana Ashley Culbertson, and I am the co-director of network development. We acknowledge that the Willamette River runs through the ancestral homelands, traditional village sites, and gathering areas of the Cayuse, Chinook, Clackamas, Cowlitz, Kalapuya, Cathlamet, Molalla, Multnomah, Numu, Tualatin, Wasco Wishram, Willamette Tumwater, and other tribes and bands of the Willamette River. We want to recognize that the Willamette Valley today is a region of many diverse Native peoples who continue to live and work here. We respectfully acknowledge and honor all Indigenous communities, past, present, future, and are grateful for their ongoing and vibrant presence. We honor the many nations of the Willamette for being the original caretakers and protectors of these lands since time immemorial, and for passing on their teachings and lifeways through past and present generations. The Willamette River Network commits to educating ourselves and our peers on the accurate and authentic experiences of tribal peoples in Oregon, and we commit towards continued learning and action in our communities. To follow our acknowledgement with action, we will continue to use our resources to prioritize partnerships with Indigenous tribes, tribal governments, and intertribal organizations. We would also like to provide a labor acknowledgement. It has been provided to us by Catherine Walker, a Beaverton School District educator, and the National Education Association's Black Caucus. We pay homage to those stolen from Africa, placed in chattel bondage, forced into labor, and called slaves. They never submitted to this oppression and have always fought together with an unbroken connection to the divine and to each other. We honor our African ancestors for their forced and unpaid labor that built much of the Americas. To all our Indigenous, Asian, and African forebears, we commit to the continued struggle for liberation and reparations, for it is through this and justice that we truly give honor.
Thank you, Tana. We have an excellent group of individuals here today, including our moderator, who are committed to decolonizing the environmental movement and making it a space that is more equitable and inclusive for all. Chad Brown is the founder of Love is King and Soul River, Inc. Soul River brings together veterans and youth to be leaders for environmental justice. And Chad, this month, in honor of Black History Month, is launching a new initiative called Love is King. This initiative will call on partners and allies from all sectors to be part of creating welcoming, accessible, and safe natural spaces, and also increasing representation of people of color in the outdoors. Today, you'll also hear from Lisa Sumption. She's the director of Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. She's the 9th director and the first female director since the agency formed in 1921. She joined OPRD in 2007 as Assistant Director of Administrative Services. OPRD serves more than 54 million visitors per year, and Lisa oversees 258 state park properties comprising 107,000 acres. This includes 362 miles of coastline protected from development by the Oregon Beach Bill. Lisa and her family live in Salem and enjoy hiking, biking, kayaking, and camping in the outdoors. Amira Streeter is also joining us today, Natural Resources Policy Advisor for Governor Kate Brown. Amira is a member of Governor Brown's Natural Resource Team, where she serves as the Natural Resources Policy Advisor. Her policy portfolio includes issues regarding agriculture, air and land quality, land use, fish and wildlife, geology, sustainability, and environmental justice. She has extensive experience in policy, collaborative problem solving, and community engagement and empowerment. Before working for Governor Brown, Amira built her career in the private and nonprofit sectors, serving as policy director for Portland City Commissioner Nick Fish, the policy and advocacy director for the Urban League of Portland, and a policy analyst and legislative liaison for Now Oregon Center, Lou Frederick. She's focused on a variety of policy issues, including Portland Harbor Superfund, housing, community development, public art, criminal justice reform, and health equity. She has a law degree from Lewis and Clark Northwestern School of Law, where she also earned a certificate in environmental and natural resources law, and has a bachelor's degree in environmental science and dance from Skidmore College. Amira is a passionate environmentalist, and she's held many teaching positions over the years with various environmental organizations, including the Environmental Professionals of Color, the Oregon chapter of the Sierra Club, and Oregon Environmental Council. We're happy to have all three of them here today as speakers who are going to share some of their work with us. We're also thrilled to have with us Greg Woolley as the moderator. He spent over 30 years in the fields of natural resource management, environmental education, and workforce development. He's melded extensive experience into his consulting firm, Creating Tomorrow's Workforce, where he's the principal consultant. Creating Tomorrow's Workforce focuses on natural resources agencies, NGOs, and environmental firms in supporting their efforts to diversify their workforce. Prior to establishing his consulting practice, Greg worked for the Nature Conservancy as its first preserve manager of color in the US. Regional natural areas planner with Metro Parks and Nature, forest planner and conservation education manager with the US Forest Service, and now workforce development manager with the City of Portland. Greg also volunteers as commissioner for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and he sits on the advisory boards of the Lake Oswego Parks and the Columbia Land Trust and People of Color Outdoors. We are so glad to have Greg Woolley with us today to moderate this conversation. I'll kick it over to Greg.
I was actually muted, so everyone got to lip sync what I was saying. I just want to say thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Tana, for those welcoming remarks. And I'm really excited and really feel honored to be able to moderate with the speakers that we have today. I've known them for a number of years. They're all doing really great work. And I feel really happy to have a small part in just helping them to be able to tell their stories to our audience today. So thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and get this party started. But before, I'll just give you a little preview of kind of how things are going to flow today. So we are starting out with some questions and conversations with our panelists. We'll have about a half hour to do that. And that will allow them to ask some or respond to some specific questions that I have about their time in nature, the level of sort of comfort and level that they have in nature, what sort of systemic changes need to occur. And so we'll have that discussion. Then we'll do a little sharing and a little show and tell, a little storytelling. So we'll be able to allow our speakers to be able to tell their stories about their organizations. And there will be an opportunity for questions to come in from the audience. And for those of you that have been through this process, you know that it's virtually impossible to get to every question to answer in real time, but we promise that we will respond to every question, if not live during our time. We'll respond to you after we're done. And then we'll have some closing remarks. So let's get started. And so speakers, some of my questions will be to everyone, and you can just forward your own response as you feel. I may call on you individually. I may have questions specific to you and your organization. And so that's how we're going to go. So let's start out with your first experience in nature. I mean, everybody has an idea of outdoors, or the first time that they had a special tree, or they first brought a worm in the house, or whatever it is that they might have done, you know, that touched themselves. I want to get an idea of what your memory is when you first spend time in nature. Kind of think back just for a few seconds. Share that. Was there a special place, and was there a special person? Who'd like to respond to that? Chad, I see you thinking. I see your mind just churning.
Don't call me out. Go to someone else.
Okay. Amir, how about you? You're muted at the moment. Maybe you could unmute. Would you like to share that experience with us?
I'm happy to answer that question. So I'm probably what you would call a non-traditional outdoor enthusiast. I grew up in Maryland. I'm originally from the East Coast, and spent about half of my childhood overseas as well, in various different countries, because my mom was in the Foreign Service. And my love for nature really stemmed for a love of animals and science and biology. Some of my first outdoor experiences were just being out in the yard and catching bugs and like looking at them, and sometimes putting them in a cute little cage and keeping them for a couple of days. We had a project in school when I was in kindergarten where we took care of a caterpillar and watched it turn into a butterfly. My first outdoor experience that I remember was as a Girl Scout. My troop went for a camping trip in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and that was the first time I had stayed in a tent. I can't say that I really enjoyed it at that point because it was raining the entire time that we were out there. And it really wasn't until I moved to Oregon that I really found a love for nature and engaging in the outdoors. One of my first cherished memories was actually with the Environmental Professionals of Color during a camping trip to Oxbow Park. And it was with a group of other BIPOC folks. I think there was a group of maybe 15 of us, and we rented out a couple of yurts. Some of us brought tents. I brought a tent and my dog along with me. And we just had fun and hung out in nature and enjoyed each other's company. And I feel like that was really the spark that I needed to say, okay, like this is something that I want to continue doing for the rest of my life. Because it's not just about engaging in nature and doing some sort of scientific experiment. It's really about connecting with people and finding time to relax and return to the earth.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. Are people hearing me okay? I got a little note that maybe my voice might have been going off and on a little bit. Get a little feedback?
Okay, you can hear me fine now, yes.
Okay. Thank you for bringing people into the equation. And as Jesse showed us with that, the 3-circle diagram, people are really important, intersects with everybody. And who else would like to share their first time nature experience, and if there was a place or a person that was important to you?
So I'll go because I think Chad's probably still thinking, and I don't want him to have to feel like he has to go. You're going to owe me later, Chad. So my experience is a little bit different. I was born and raised in northern Michigan in a dairy farm family. And so the outdoors was pretty much just kind of the way of living. And our vacations weren't, spring break off to Disney World or land or any of those things. It was camping, it was kayaking, and Michigan, there are Great Lakes everywhere. And so it's kind of like Oregon, your DNA is definitely recreation. So I can't remember a time that it's more of my sanctuary. It's that place where I can reground myself and have that connection. And I think over the years, being in different places, recognizing what a privilege it is that we have in many of our places to even have those spaces to connect with. Amira, it was fascinating to hear the different places that you've lived, and I can only imagine what recreation looks like in other countries and experiences. So I'm intrigued by that conversation.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. All right, Chad, you've had time to contemplate. So
Yes.
what would you like to share with us?
You know, every time this kind of question comes, I have to really think about it, you know, because my experience is a little different. I feel very blessed and very fortunate. You know, my first connecting to the outdoors, coming from a family of hunters and farmers in Texas. You know, my father was a black cowboy rodeo. He participated in rodeos, and he, you know, so when I was just a kid, just, you know, I mean, just like 6, 7 years old, whatever, he introduced me to rodeo and horses, and you know, and he'd take me out on hunts, and you know, I would hunt with my father on the land for deer, and so I think it has a really awesome story that we came across a mother that was in the pasture. The deer was dead, and the baby fawn was there, and my father picked up the baby fawn and brought the fawn home, and that fawn became my pet, and I raised that deer for the rest of its remaining years. And so that deer used to stay in my closet and used to stay in the bed with me. And I was the only kid that would walk around the entire urban neighborhood with the deer on the dog leash, you know, but, you know, but that was, you know, it was really special. I feel very honored and very blessed that my parents opened me up like that, you know, but that was, yeah, that was my first experience. I just kind of was born on the farm, around animals and wild land with my father and my mom. Yeah.
Thank you, Chad. That's an experience that very few of us have had. It's really unique. So thank you so much. And I'll just share real quickly. I had the good fortune, my parents were married in Yosemite. I think they're probably the only Black folks for miles from that point, from that little chapel in Yosemite. But when I was 6 and my sister was 3, they brought us to Yosemite. So I got to go to Yosemite at a very young age, and of course it's overwhelming at that age. The Yosemite Valley, El Capitan, Half Dome, it was just spectacular. And that was my first overwhelming experience immersed in a big landscape scale of nature. So thank you. Thank you so much. So we know that the comfort level varies with folks that go out into nature. For some, it's more comfortable. Some can be uncomfortable. Some feel welcome, very welcome. Some feel less welcome. And the outdoors can actually be unsafe for some folks when there are people that are not accustomed to seeing them in those spaces. And so that's something I'd like to get into a little bit as we move forward. I'm wondering, I'd like to ask individually if you've ever felt unwelcome or uncomfortable or unsafe in nature, and can you share what that felt like? And has that had any effect on you in making decisions to go out in nature? Have you maybe had second thoughts or second guessed whether you should venture out into wild places or not? That's kind of 3 questions combined into one. And is there anyone that just right offhand would like to respond to that?
I can jump into that since I went first for the last question. So I feel that I've been very fortunate compared to other people's experiences, that I haven't had a specific time that I could point to where I felt unsafe or unwelcome out in nature. I think part of that comes from, you know, my upbringing. Maryland is very diverse, and it's not uncommon to see people of all different walks of life out in nature. And then growing up overseas, where usually you're the only Black person for miles around, and where people are kind of surprised to see you engage in nature. In Oregon, I think it's a very interesting dynamic that we deal with the history of the state being an exclusionary law state, and that definitely had an impact on how the types of folks we see nowadays in the state. I feel like it's really important to be willing to engage in those spaces and not have fear about it. But I've also been really lucky to live in a place, in a part of Portland specifically, that has a lot of nature areas that are open and free for anyone to go to. Like, I really enjoy going to Forest Park, for example, and have never felt unsafe there. When you start to venture outside the metro region core, that's when it can get pretty dicey. And I haven't had been out in nature by myself in those instances, especially overnight. So I feel like I've been fortunate in that way, but I do recognize that not everyone's experience is that. Oftentimes we can feel invisible on the trails. Especially when you're walking on a trail and you see someone coming towards you, you kind of ask yourself, like, oh, is this person going to move to the side, or am I going to have to do it? Am I visible to them? Can we share the space together? And so I think I often think about that when I'm out on my day hikes.
Okay. So Mira, you mentioned that you don't go out alone on the trails. Is that a conscious decision, or is that just coincidence?
I think it's a conscious decision, unless I'm gonna do like a quick day hike at like more of a park that's closer to an urban area, like Forest Park, or I have a small park that's really close to where I live, around the block from me, and feel very comfortable going to those places.
Okay, well, thank you. Lisa or Chad, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I'll add on to what Amira said. Growing up in it, it was always there, and it was part of, what we did. But, as they started venturing out away from home and getting, I would never go on my own, just for safety reasons. And then being a female makes that even more interesting. And then I can't even imagine what that looks like when you add other dynamics like color of skin and racial backgrounds and language barriers and those things, because those same experiences will come up for me being a female on a trail going, am I safe? Am I the only one out here? What does that look like? And then if you're anybody who reads mystery books or, serial killer books or things like that, I mean, all of those things come up, right? And so, although it's not the same experience, I can only imagine what that feels like if you have other layers on top of that, and nothing looks like you, nothing feels like you, nothing, so I can totally empathize with that feeling. And I do have it. I live in Salem. I live close to Minto Brown Park, and there are certain times I won't go because I wouldn't want to be there alone, or, they're just elements that get introduced into spaces that I think that we all need to be very cautious of and careful of on many different levels. But I wouldn't want to be out alone on trails all by myself or get lost. I have a natural tendency to do that as well. But yeah, there are times that I don't feel safe, but I'm like Amira, I go to places where I know that I'm going to be more safe and that I'm more comfortable and things like that. So.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Chad, how about you?
Yeah.
We have talked about this, and I know you've had some experiences. Is there anything you'd like to share?
Yeah. I think a lot of I have always experienced some type of aggression in the outdoors. I'm not a stranger to the backcountry. I can navigate pretty well in the backcountry. It's pretty much where I spend a lot of my time at, not really in the city parks, but randomly in city parks. I feel safe in city parks, but the further I do go out, there's this place where you become really, really vulnerable. And I have dealt with, everything from my brake lines being pulled out, not and being stranded, and I've been shot at twice. Actually, that type of aggression that actually happened here in Oregon, and it was really because it's like the whole picture here. I'm on the water. It's me and my battle buddy, my service dog Axe. We're out there on the water, and I'll just want to just try to find peace. That's what I do. I get out and fly fish, etc. And this guy he came at it aggressive right across the water. Probably 50, 60 yards down. He tells me to get off his river. And it was his ownership, and so I did not get off his river. I continued to fish. And so he drew his weapon and did a warning shot to scare me. And I still didn't move, and then he shot at me and missed me basically. And so I got out of that situation and able to pull out and everything like that, but it's crazy. I mean, I've numerous of times I've faced aggression, and here in Oregon, backcountry. But yeah, that's one of my experiences. Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's really difficult to hear, Chad. And it sounds really traumatic. And I appreciate you just being comfortable enough to talk about that. And it seems like these kinds of incidences have escalated in the past few years. And there's always been some challenge with and discomfort, of course, with women being outdoors and having vulnerability as a woman. And it's compounded with people of color, and I feel like it's escalated in recent years about what land quote belongs to whom.
Yeah.
And there's this song, "This land is my land, this land is your land," but there seems to have gotten twisted around quite a bit. And it's difficult for those of us that are trying to encourage more people to go out in nature and say, these are public lands, they belong to everyone, you should be out there, you should enjoy it, you have every right to be there. And then having to deal with this sort of territoriality is really challenging. And so changes need to occur, and a lot of those changes are systemic, they're institutional. There's that individual kind of changing hearts and minds and just person to person interrelationships that need to happen. But within organizations and agencies and even NGOs, there are changes that need to happen that are systemic to help places to be welcoming, to help people to feel welcome. And so I wanted to, it's kind of a big question, and you may need a few seconds to think about it, but think about your organization. I know, for instance, Amira, you have responsibility, you have broad responsibility for a range of natural resource agencies, and the governor has made diversity, equity, and inclusion a priority of hers, along with addressing COVID and a couple of other things. But there's so much variation from one agency to the next. They're all in sort of different stages along this journey of diversifying the workforce, of shifting their culture. And so I don't have to put you on the spot at the moment, but that's something that I'm thinking about that I would like at some point for you to address. And then Lisa, we've talked, and it's probably been over a year, we've talked about state parks in particular. And state parks, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel that state parks touches more people across the state than any other state agencies. When you consider the local state parks and camping, hiking, boating, all the things that happen on state parks. I mean, there's a huge reach and a very personal sort of reach that state parks has. But then you look at the workforce of state parks, and particularly in management, it's very white, and it's not yet representing the body of people across our state, that and the demographics, as we know, are shifting daily. So those are a couple of questions I'd like for you two to think about, and then we'll get to you, Chad. And I mean, you're on the ground making these things happen, and you could talk a little bit. You'll have more time to talk about that as well. So Amira or Lisa, in your respective roles, what sorts of changes within your organizations do you think would help to address these, the welcoming issue, diversity within the agency, the culture of the agency? What do you think we can do? What do you think, in your role, in the role of your organization, what do you think we can do? You can do moving
Yeah.
forward.
So Greg, I'll go because Amira's gone first twice, so I'm going to let her breathe. And Chad, thank you for being as vulnerable as you are and sharing your stories, because it motivates all of us to want to push this change and to have these conversations and to have a different outcome, because no one should experience that anywhere, let alone the outdoors. And so, like, as you mentioned, Greg, right, it is a big responsibility. We have over 50 million visitors. We have over 100,000 acres, 250 parks, right? There's a lot of people coming in, and that change doesn't occur overnight. And I think the biggest realization I've had since I became the director, and this was my #1 priority, and I'm sure everyone went, oh, first female director, she wants to talk about diversity and including everyone and how neat. But gosh, if people could just rewind and look where we were to where we are. So I think the biggest mistake I made in the beginning was trying to go too fast to change something that has been broken for a very long time. And what I mean by that is, yes, the workforce doesn't reflect the changing population, and our visitors do not reflect. And I will share this a little bit later when we get into presentations. Our visitor population doesn't reflect the growing and changing environment either. And so trying to solve really big issues like that doesn't happen overnight, and trying to shift the culture of an organization. So if the team that is there, right, it is what it is, it's who we have. If we can't shift the culture there and make them welcoming, trying to do those efforts to diversify a workforce when the workforce that they're going to be working with aren't welcoming, and they're going to treat people like Chad just described, maybe hopefully not that bad in a work environment, but we've got to shift the mindset of our staff, of our visitors, our volunteers, so that way it really truly is a welcoming, authentic. So, spending a ton of time internally having those conversations to try to start shifting and to get the need there, right? And then getting into the place that we can start hiring and diversifying the workforce so that people feel welcome. I can't imagine what it would feel like to be the only person in an organization that is a person of color, right? And then all of a sudden, you have to act like you're somebody that you're not, and you can't bring your true authentic self. So I mean, there's a lot of work that we are continuing to move forward. But then we would like to hire and promote folks that represent, so that way when you are out there, you feel safe, right? And then some of our areas are vast, they're huge. I mean, I don't even know how I would have a ranger there to do anything to help Chad in that situation, right? I mean, sometimes you get so far out into the wild that you really are on your own, and that illusion of safety, because you're in a public space, is just that. It is an illusion if there isn't someone there to help protect you. So, and then that engagement work, and we started doing engagement work stuff very quickly. So I'm going to go into more of this after, but it's a huge, huge opportunity, and one that I'm honored and excited to try to solve for all of us. So I'll hand it over to Mira.
Yes, I'll talk a little bit more about the legislative work that we're trying to do to address these issues during the presentation portion. But I agree with what Lisa is saying. We really need to take the time to look internally as to what are the systems that we have in place that are acting as barriers to the people that we're trying to reach, and to engage with folks who want to be out in nature. Additionally, I think some of the work that I'm leading on in reducing barriers for communities is creating space to co-create decisions or policies that would enable people of color specifically to feel welcome. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I think this co-creation and creating the room for people to tell their stories and to explain their experiences in a way that is sharing and we can like learn from that is critical and really important. There is some additional work that we're doing to figure out how to best create pipelines around careers and hiring and elevating diverse staff, employers and managers to be a part of state agencies. And that's something we've been working on for a very long time. But I think the area we need to focus on is the implementation. You know, how are we getting folks who I guess have been ignored for a long time to engage with the state and here, you know, you are welcome. You are, we want you here. We want your expertise. We want you to be a part of this as well. And making sure that they are able to be recruited and retained for those positions.
Okay, thank you, Mira. We'll look forward to hearing more about that in our show and tell time. So thanks for sharing that, because I'll be interested in how do you reach into these specific agencies like Lisa's to influence what happens. Chad, how do you feel like the barriers can be addressed that we're talking about, and what sort of changes need to happen within agencies and those that are managing the public spaces that you bring people out into, bring the veterans, bring the youth out into these spaces? What can those land managers do?
We need more land managers out there. Number one, we need more. That's just not, especially going out further, roaming further. The answer to your question, part of that I'll share in my presentation as well. But with those land managers, we need, I guess this, Amir was talking about this whole co-creation. This whole co-creation needs to also play this role within the land managers and integrating with, community leaders and community organizations, et cetera, and have these, a collaborative conversation. The end of this piece, we need to somehow create a safety net, a network basically in the outdoors, right? And this network exists in the city park level, it exists in the state level, but it's a network that identifies with the safety that signals to BIPOC community that this is a sanctuary of a safe space, a no tolerance zone, ignorance, bigotry, et cetera, but, to help build that out and to help give it that wall of strength is we need to put more land managers, rangers. There needs to be more out there, in order to build that wall up and everything, because I think, BIPOC community, if you give them the opportunity of that measure of safety, then that opportunity grows more into roaming further. And we want everybody to roam. Everybody should have the right to roam further in nature, period, right? And so, but in order to have BIPOC feel comfortable to do that, there needs to be some type of establishment of that safety network put in place, basically. Yeah.
Thank you, Chad. And
Can I add,
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. You want to follow up real quick? We're going to move into presentations in just a moment, but go ahead.
Yes, just a real quick follow-up on that with what Chad just said. I think, we're talking about the recognition that there is an issue, right? Figuring out what we can do internally and externally to engage community and making sure we're understanding what the issues is. Yeah. And then in terms of getting the more, I think oftentimes with the state, we need to figure out what are the resources that we can dedicate towards those efforts and implementation, whatever that looks like. If that's more employees for state parks to help with this endeavor, whether it's specific programs, or even providing state-funded support to the organizations that are doing the work, like Chad's organization. There's a couple others like Unlikely Hikers, EPOC, Environmental Professionals of Color, and CDE, and other groups that are leading the charge on these efforts.
Okay, thank you. And I just had real quickly, Chad, you mentioned getting more staff out on the land, more people. Also, it matters what they look like, okay, and how culturally aware and how sensitive they are to the new influx of more and more diverse people coming out on the land. So getting more people out there that are managing, that are responsible, that can respond is important, but they need to represent more of our state. So thank you. So we're just going to move right into presentations. We're running a little bit off schedule, but I mean, your stories were so great that we just had to keep going. So thank you. There is sometimes folks a little bit behind the scene that give me a little message, say, hey, we got to keep moving. So that's what we're going to do. And so now it's show and tell time, sharing time, a little different than when you were in school. There was a kid in my 5th grade class whose dad worked for Planters Peanuts, and she did show and tell talking about peanuts, and she brought the little pins with Mr. Peanut on top of the pin with the little hat on, and she passed out the pins. This is different. We're going to do some storytelling. Storytelling has been going on since millennium, and it's a really important way for us to learn about cultures. And so we have Chad, Amira, and Lisa. We're going to try to keep it to about 8 minutes or less if possible. We do have folks that are going to be coming in with some chat questions. Those questions will be moderated a little bit off-site, and then some will, hopefully we'll be able to answer some of those while we're still in real time during our program. So Chad, let's start with you with Love is King. You have a lot coming up, a lot of big stuff. And so if you could give us a little overview of Love is King, we've been looking forward to hearing you talk about it.
Yeah, sure. I'll just go ahead and share my screen. Is that, okay. Let's see here. So I am really excited and stoked to share with you about this new nonprofit organization launched. It's called Love is King, Let Freedom Roam. So, this is another part of a solution of how we can work together and make our outdoors more of a welcome, and then also address the whole safety issue basically for BIPOC communities coming to the outdoors. The movement that Love is King is what we wanted to be, a movement. It's a world where nature's grandeur, nourishment, and healing power are accessible to all people. We see the freedom to roam in nature as a basic, undeniable human right for everyone. We're committed to defending equal and equitable access. We're committed to ensuring a safe and tranquil experience. And we're committed to elevating the healing power of nature for all Black, Indigenous, people of color, and our lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender citizens. When we ensure safe access to nature, we nurture healing and we improve the physical, mental, and spiritual health of the most vulnerable amongst us. Love is Kings are leading this movement, leading with love, courage, empathy, and it's time to take charge of change. The inspiration of Love is King does come from the quote, "Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love." The Love is King logo is a spirit. It's like basically it's a grassroots independent nonprofit organization which practices a nonviolent, creative, and empathetic confrontation that exposes the problem of equal opportunity, equal access, and safe experiences in nature. Let freedom roam to spin on the words of Martin Luther King. We believe that the freedom for all people to roam in nature without fear and intimidation is a basic, undeniable human right. Love is King says no to confrontation, inequality, ignorance, intimidation, judgment, closed-mindedness, fear, and status quo. And we say yes to the freedom to roam. Behind Love is King, to give you a couple points of what's happening behind Love is King is that we have established what we call Love is King Guardians. These guardians are corporate, military veterans, politicians, outdoor enthusiasts, ministers, nonprofit community activists, influencers. This is one way of how we can insert ourselves with influencers or people in front of companies and organizations, how we can marry and work together as one to help create what one of our events was called Heritage Events, as I'll share that with you earlier. Moving forward. Love is King champions We focus also on our youth, a little bit older than youth, right around the 17 age group, but what we do is empower them to create Love is King chapters, give them an opportunity in that platform where they're advocates of conservation, they're advocates of our wildlife, and also becomes advocates of safety and welcome access as well, carrying that torch down to the next generation. Our heritage events that we have happening right now, it's a heritage event. Really, if what it's like looking at a natural history museum. And when you walk in that natural history museum, you have a guide that's guiding you and showing you the art and the culture. We left that experience and we applied it into an easy entry access on a trail. We take that same experience. And so that history becomes a figure of that month, like Black History Month. And what does that look like? Basically, we work with corporate sponsors, and then we have the Love is King community comes into play. And the events that happens at the bottom, we have the Matthew Henson outing experience, the Buffalo Soldiers, the George Washington. We identify mavericks of history of time, of people's culture, and we celebrate them into an outdoor experience culturally and environmentally. Gives the people the opportunity and everybody an opportunity to welcome them, to be free, go into a bias-free zone and be basically comfortable, to be able to explore and have a good time. This is entry level to get people out and get people connected to the outdoors. And we do the same thing like the Native American celebration as well, just to show you how the model basically will roll over itself into a holiday, another holiday of cultural celebration, basically. One of the last things that we have within the organization is what we call Stories Over Silence. Stories Over Silence gives an opportunity for BIPOC to record their experiences in nature. It takes away the charge of aggression of when you confront it and you talk to, it's like, well, I don't believe that doesn't happen, etc. Well, you don't have to worry about that. This is an opportunity where the aggression or comes of someone who's in denial, etc. They can sit at their own time and listen to what they have to say. And that's all you can do is listen. And basically, so we take the charge out and just, for example, we get videos from many folks, and I share this 4-minute video.
Hi, my name is Ranga. I'm a private chef by trade and an avid outdoorsman and die-hard fly fishing angler. There's this idea that persists that the outdoors of our great nation are accessible and available equally to everyone. As a person of color, I'm here to tell you that that's simply not the case. In my years of fishing, foraging, and hiking, I am always treated as a guest, most often a welcome guest, and sometimes an unwelcome guest. But at the end of the day, a guest. But that's my public land. It is my right as an American citizen to access those areas. Most folks are worried about spraining an ankle while on a hike or a bear attack and carrying bear spray as a precaution, or being attacked by so many different animals or being bitten by a rattlesnake and. I've got to worry about all of those things. And as a person of color, I also need to be wary of who is in my zone when I am outside. The most recent incident that I can think of was from last July. My girlfriend and I decided to explore an area that was new to us here in Montana. So we took about 5 days off and car camped and hiked and fished new creeks. And in that exploration, we were led up a very remote 12-mile dirt road and up to a trailhead. And when we got to the trailhead in the middle of the busiest time of the Montana tourist season, there was only one other car at the trailhead, and my girlfriend and I were so excited that we would have it, relatively speaking, to ourselves to explore and not have to contend with a lot of other people. So we went on a hike, we had a great time, and when we came back, we noticed that the only other vehicle that was there when we arrived was still there. No other vehicles besides that other vehicle and ours, except with one difference, which was that the car was running, the air conditioner was on. Thought, okay, cool, he's probably getting ready to take off. It's a hot and humid day. So yeah, he's probably trying to cool off like we were going to be doing here in just another minute or two. So we started our process of changing out of our sweaty hiking clothes and grabbing snacks and getting ready for our drive to the next destination when the white male that was in the vehicle stepped out of the car, and he kind of started walking to us kind of quickly and kind of furrowing his brow, and, you know, like he had purpose. And at first we were kind of alarmed. We thought that something was wrong, that he needed help. So my girlfriend engaged first, and, you know, maintaining social distancing, she still went up to him and started talking, and, hey, are you okay? Is everything okay? And he just starts going off about the political state of our country and what's going on, and, you know, these crying liberals, and you know, he didn't understand any of the protests going on. And my girlfriend and I kind of look at each other like, whoa, okay, well, he's safe, so that's good. And then we, at this point, notice when we look down that he has got a holster for a sidearm on his waist. And now we've got someone who has come up to us unsolicited, deciding to share all of his political views, clearly fired up and irate. He's got a firearm on him. And at one point in the conversation, he looks at me directly in my eyes. He's like, what's up with Black Lives Matter? It makes no sense to me. He's like, Black Lives Matter. What about all lives matter? And I'm like, oh man, okay. All right, I'm gonna back up. I can't engage in this. Safety is of concern. We need to get out of here. So slowly we backed away while maintaining conversation, and we were respectful and we were nice, but you better believe that the both of us were terrified. And slowly we got in our car and just boogied the hell out of there as quickly as we could. These incidences happen all the time. They're not coincidences. I have these kinds of incidents of color, they occur multiple times a year. I would honestly say on average once every couple of months. And this idea that I am an unwelcome guest sometimes, I am a welcome guest most of the times, is ridiculous. I live in this country. I am here. This is my public land. It's not your public land. It is ours. It is ours to share as long as we step into it with respect. And I just find it ridiculous. And I think that we need to really understand that people of color are not treated the same way when it comes to the outdoor spaces. It is not safe. We do not feel safe. We do not feel welcome. But as my friend Chad Brown says, we are here to play, and we are here to stay.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So that's pretty much the end of what our Stories Over Silence is all about. Basically, it I think even to government officials and to when we're talking about trying to solve a problem of welcome access and safety, also in our stories gives us a way to crack the code if we learn how to listen more and learn and hear what people are saying. This gives BIPOC community to express themselves and to speak and share, you know, and it also gives the listener to think about what they're talking about on a deeper level, et cetera, and educate, but also a process in helping to crack into code. Because before we can thinking about outdoors is for all, as what a lot of brand companies will put out there, and green for all, et cetera, we need to start looking at the fear and unraveling that fear and pulling that back and getting a little deeper to the problem and what's going on. So,
okay. Thank you, Chad. We're gonna, and thank you for providing that testimonial of that individual. That was really powerful, and it speaks to a lot of what people are going through out in the outdoors. So thank you so much. We're gonna need to move on to Elisa. And could you just go ahead and start your presentation and tell us a little bit more about state parks and the good things that you're doing.
Sorry, this top thing covers up my little PowerPoint thing, so I can't get it into presentation mode. There we go. Okay, I don't want it to be small. I saw comments about making the screen bigger. So I'm a little overwhelmed, to be really honest, Chad, that that was powerful and good motivation, right? Because when we think about the freedom to roam, it's something that is so taken for granted. And when you get to share stories like that and hear stories like that, it's just more motivating to really, truly advance this conversation in a different, everyone should have the freedom to roam. Those should not be experiences that anyone has. So, I just want to talk a little bit, Greg, about what we're doing at OPRD and to get to some of those questions you had earlier. So some of it's a little bit repetitive, but what I will start with is this is the racial ethnic makeup of OPRD visitors in comparison to Oregon population. And if you look down on that bottom line, the majority of our visitors are white Caucasian. And when you look at the growing population of Oregon's demographics, that is not, I mean, if nothing else, we'll be out of business in multiple years if we don't even start thinking about this, let alone it's the right damn thing to do. I would imagine if you take our staff chart, it would look very similar. So we have a lot of work to do, a lot of work to do. We have, as I talked about earlier, we started kind of doing engagement work initially, and it was very clear that from just that testimony we just heard, right, our visitors are not prepared to be welcoming. And when you have over 50 million visitors, we have to get our internal story aligned so that way our staff are prepared to help de-escalate those types of conversations if they're there to even assist to do that. As Chad mentioned, you know, there's not a ranger every 50 feet to come in and advocate in those conversations. So just we backed up a little bit and said, if we're going to welcome folks, we need to make sure that we really truly are safe. And so we started doing a lot more internal looking and started something called engage, relate, and adapt. And that's engaging in the conversation and then learning how to relate to the conversation, because it may not be the walk or journey or story that we've had, but that adaptation could be it could be as big as redesigning our parks for everyone, or it could be just little modifications like, hey, we have a badge and a uniform. Should we be in a badge and a uniform? So we've done a ton of work on the internal readiness so that way we can go out and do a little bit more outreach and start focusing in differently and recognizing that we have so many partners like Chad, and I've noticed earlier, Keta from CDE, and there's so many partners that are already engrossed in this work that can truly help us. We have your public spaces. And so if our partners can come and help get people more safe and more comfortable to be in the outdoors and help us learn how to be different and show up differently. So we've done some focus group work. We've done some outreach and some events together. These are some comments that we pulled out of the focus groups that I think are just, they're worth reflecting a little bit on. You know, what would motivate people going outside, kind of like what Amira was talking about. You go past them, maybe they intimidate you. You're safe in your city park, but you might not be safe heading all the way out to, you know, Willall Lake all by yourself. And then talking about, you know, what does it look like, the high demand for camping, and you'd feel safer in large groups. And we have silly rules like, oh, only 10 people can be in a campsite. Why do we have that rule? What does that look like? So challenging ourselves to look at all of our policies and procedures around visitor engagement, visitor experience, and looking at things like badges and uniforms, why we have limits in particular sites and areas, because we do know that different communities of color want to congregate in larger groups and do feel safer. And how do we take that down? I can remember at Silver Falls, we had large Russian and Hispanic communities wanting to pull picnic tables together, and we were pulling picnic tables away saying, no, you can only have so many picnic tables in an area. And it's like, but they're not doing anything wrong, buy more picnic tables. So it's just really learning in some of those places with each other. We did a couple of summers ago, we did some outreach, and we did a weekend with Adventures Without Limits. We thought it would be an interesting way to explore and talk to folks that have spinal cord injuries and are in wheelchairs and have even more barriers to the outdoors and connecting. And we spent a weekend where our staff even got in wheelchairs and experienced what the park was like to be somebody who couldn't have the same privileges as us able-bodied folks. So the fascinating part over the weekend is we all learned with each other and found ways to create better access. It's really hard to see, but in the top picture, one of the things that the ADA community has created, the standards for the picnic table create an ADA space at the end of a picnic table, which means you can get one wheelchair up to a picnic table. So if a group of folks in wheelchairs wanted to come up, they couldn't use a table to congregate around together. And so we had conversations around what simple things could we do if it weren't big budget policy things? What could we do right now to be more welcoming and more inclusive? And we took bolts out of that picnic table and took the seats off, and we were able to get wheelchairs around it. Just simple little things that weren't, I think sometimes we think these things can be so insurmountable that we don't see the small things in front of us that could be done more quickly as we continue to grow and learn about the bigger opportunities. It was a great weekend. It was good learning for them and for us, but we're continuing to do more of those types of things. We have, I think, 3 or maybe 4 years now in a row, we've partnered with the Healthy Birth Initiative out of Multnomah County. And we started with day use trips, and it became so popular that they wanted to do overnight trips. I will tell you, we had a horrible experience our second year with this. They had an overnight experience while mom and kiddos were in the restrooms. We had other white visitors that had been there all day for a wedding, and they had been drinking, and they came over and said, "You don't belong here, you don't belong here." Told them they needed to leave the park. So that internal conversation to prepare our rangers for those situations, because those are difficult when you don't have policies, procedures, and rules in place to deal with just a lack of respect. And so I feel like we're getting a little bit better. Every experience obviously introduces growth, but I wish there were none. So here's another, just thinking about, we're encouraging people to come out and sleep outside, and the other communities may see that as something, that is sleeping outside is a different connotation of being poor and houseless in their community, and just better understanding different cultures and what people need or want, and help break down some of those barriers. We do Boys and Girls Club. We've had a governor's camp out the last, I think, 5 years. We didn't get to do it last year, obviously, but that ends up being folks that have never been in the outdoors overnight. We bring all the gear. It's the first time they bike, camp, kayak, first s'mores. It's always great to see somebody with their first s'more. And so just some more focus group participant comments there that we've done. So, we've been working on a welcoming statement for so long that I just don't understand where we keep getting hung up. And I think it's that the shift of it's a welcoming commitment, right? The statement doesn't mean anything if the commitment is not behind the statement. And I think that's been the more important part, is making sure that we are prepared as an organization and a community of users to be able to welcoming people into their public spaces safely. And that's going to continue to take effort, but we're committed, and like I said, I'm honored that we get to be in this time and space to be able to make this cultural shift for us. So I just hope that more conversations like the one we're having today will continue to help us allow other visitors that have never experienced their public spaces the opportunity to safely come and do so. So I'm just honored my panelists are willing to share their stories so that we can all become better together. So I'm going to stop there and give Amira her time.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Lisa. And then just a quick follow-up question. As you know, I was reviewing your SCORP, which is your report on how people use state parks and their values and what they need. And I appreciate all that work that you did. And in terms of people of color, the focus of the SCORP report was there was a decision that the 2 fastest growing populations in the state, Latinx and Asian, would be the people of color groups that were focused on in that report. And Black, African American, and Indigenous people were left out. And I believe your response at the time was that there were some budget constraints, and so you kind of needed to have a little narrower focus, and that there was another study either starting or ongoing that would be focusing on the other groups. So we know that people of color culturally have specific experiences, specific needs. And so everybody needs to be included in a survey to to have a better understanding, to be able to do the things that you're talking about with preparing your staff, helping your staff to be more culturally sensitive, more culturally aware. Are you aware of what is happening with developing a better understanding of what the groups that were left out of your report need in the outdoors?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. So when we had that conversation, I guess it was over a year ago now, right? So we hadn't, the SCORP really wasn't that inclusive previously, and so we started somewhere. It was based on capacity and what we could incorporate and bring into it. So we're going to continue to evolve that and include more folks to be able to make sure we can take that information and actually do something a little bit more valuable. So yes, we'll continue to get all folks included into the survey, but that was a big stretch even from where it had been previously to even get into those communities.
So is there another survey that's coming up, or I'm not clear on what you're saying?
Yeah, so we have
as far as when you're doing that.
So we do the SCORP every 5 years, and so we'll continue to we do summer surveys as well with some of our visitors, and so we'll continue to do those and use these focus groups and outreach to capture that information a little bit more specifically than just SCORP.
Yeah.
It's not the only avenue or only tool that we use to do that kind of outreach. And
right. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to Amira. You've been waiting patiently, Amira, so thank you. Looks like you'd like to share screen and get started. So thank you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So I guess aligned with what Chad and Lisa said, I want to talk a little bit about the legislative concepts and bills that we're working on out of the governor's office to elevate the very concerns that were just expressed today. So where can the state advance equity for outdoor recreation? And, you know, I think our conversations that we're having in this room show that we need to recognize that we need to meet people where they are and acknowledge the historic and current inequities around access to the outdoors. Really taking that time to listen and understand and comprehend the barriers and challenges that BIPOC folks and other underserved communities are facing, so that we can work with them and develop recommendations to address gaps and opportunities to improve. So this work that I'm about to show you really focuses on getting people out into nature and then making sure that these public nature areas are welcoming spaces for everyone. I'm going to talk first about House Bill 2171. This bill had a public hearing a couple weeks ago, so there's no call to action right now. This bill is the governor's omnibus outdoor recreation bill. Recognizing that outdoor recreation enhances the health and well-being of everyone, we want to make sure that we are covering as much as possible to enhance opportunities for people to engage in the great outdoors. Oregon is really beautiful, and we have lots of nature spaces that people often like to recreate in a variety of different ways, from camping to hunting, fishing, skiing, biking, etc. So firstly, this bill strengthens the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund, which is housed under the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. I can, in the interest of time, share more information with the Willamette River Network to share with the group if folks are interested. That fund would require an allocation of state funds for $1 million that would be matched by private and public partners who are also donating to the fund. The bill also seeks to strengthen the Office of Outdoor Recreation by following up with the recommendations that were created by the Governor's Task Force on the Outdoors that just finished convening mid-2020. There are a number of recommendations in there, but what we're trying to do is make sure that state recreation projects are accessible to everyone, So folks, for example, that are mobilely challenged or part of the disabled community can actively engage in the outdoors. We want to develop and maintain a centralized website so people can get all the state recreation information at once and know exactly where to go. Sometimes even that a small fix creates more opportunities for people. And then we'd like the Office of Outdoor Recreation, which is under the Parks Department, to investigate gaps, opportunities for outdoor recreation infrastructure, and collaborate with other state agencies to design and propose legislation that would create grants to support outdoor recreation organizations and accelerators. The second bill that I want to talk about is Senate Bill 289. And we currently have placeholder language on that bill right now, meaning this concept I'm about to tell you is you're not going to see it on the website quite yet. There is a public hearing scheduled for Thursday, March 4th. And what we're attempting to do is to address those instances where people are aggressive or hostile to people of color and other marginalized groups. So this is an attempt to get at that issue. We want to ensure that outdoor spaces are safe from hate or harassment. As we just have been discussing in this room, communities of color, members of the LGBTQ community, and other historically underrepresented groups can often feel invisible or unwelcome in outdoor spaces. I can point to two incidences that have been pretty high priority in the news. And, as we've been hearing today, there's so many stories about people being harassed or intimidated or dealing with hostility. So one very egregious incident was occurred in 2020 of last year, where a group of white men harassed a Black family with racist slurs and Nazi salutes on a public beach. The police were able to assist the family to leave the beach safely, and those men were charged with a number of crimes and removed from that area. A similar incident that occurred at a state park was a trans woman was brutally attacked and assaulted in a restroom by someone who, perceived that they needed to be hateful. And that person was charged with a bias crime and a number of other assault and harassment crimes. This person was also banned from state parks within the county. And I think this shows that, we really shouldn't tolerate hate or violence anywhere in our nature spaces. So what Senate Bill 289 is attempting to do is to, one, set standards within state agencies to withhold recreational privileges from people who commit bias crimes. Two, it would create an accountability structure within state agencies, Parks, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and Marine Board, to name 3 of them, so that they are allowed to suspend, revoke, or deny a permit or license related to outdoor recreation, everything from hunting to fishing to camping, etc. And then there was an interest in including a third element to educate and sort of restore that person to changing their hearts and minds by offering either community service or anti-bias education, so that person can, understand the wrongs of their ways and actually contribute to our nature spaces. This recommendation came out of the Governor's Racial Justice Council Environmental Equity Committee subgroup. And I hope that this is getting at an issue that needs to be addressed in, I saw a question in the chat around addressing threats and issues, but how do you effectively remove that person from a nature space? And that's what this is attempting to do. The hearing would be in Senate Energy and Environment on Thursday, March 4th. And I've actually asked Lisa and Chad to represent their organizations at that as well. And I think that's it. And I'm happy to take questions on either one of the bills.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, Amira. And I'm really, I mean, hats off to you and the governor and the rest of the governor's staff for moving this legislation forward. I think it's really important that this is moving ahead at a statewide level. And I would just add real quickly that the Oregon Conservation Recreation Fund is alive and well and happening now. And we just recently completed our selection process for our second round of awardees. And there is an equity fund within that fund, specifically targeting and focusing on BIPOC-led organizations and BIPOC serving organizations. So that's going great, and we appreciate the matching aspect from the legislature. So we are going to move ahead and get some questions from the audience. We have just a few minutes, and as I said, we'll respond to the ones as we can for the next few minutes, and then we'll definitely respond afterwards. And so we have, I don't know if it's Tana, Jesse, that has been perusing those questions.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
And so are you going to ask those then, or are you going to
Yes,
send those to me? I wasn't
like
sure how
that.
we were going to do that. Do you
Yeah,
just
I'll
want to go ahead and pose the question?
Yes, I'll
The questions that get selected?
Yes, I'll ask a few questions and we'll pitch them to the speakers.
Okay.
And see
Great.
how people. So, first question here is: what is the best way to encourage more BIPOC folks to professionally enter the outdoor recreation field?
Okay, that can go to anybody who wants to respond to it. So feel free. If you got that burning urge, just jump right in.
I wish there was a simple answer, right? I mean, there's, at least from a state agency perspective, one, you know, as it's been pointed out, we're predominantly a white organization that's 36,000 employees. And I don't know exactly what that number looks like across 100 state agencies, but I would also argue that we're not really good at recruiting. We announce, we assume that everybody knows how to go to a government web page to look for a job that they may or may not even know about. And so that recruitment and that engagement, along with, you know, people also need to look like other people. And so I think there's a lot of welcoming and re-engineering that need to be done, and restructuring the way that we approach hiring, because I think we could do the outreach. I'm just not sure that we have the best systems set up to encourage and invite different communities to consider employment with the state of Oregon.
Oh, that's so well said, Lisa. And I think, you know, there's been research about, you know, if a person of color can see someone slightly older than them that they can racially identify with, it will often help them see themselves perhaps up leveling in that type of role. And so actually a question to follow up from what you just said is, what would it look like to have sufficient staffing at natural areas and parks? And one of the nuances to this question was, typically when you see a ranger, they're in ranger gear that can kind of look like a military uniform style. And this question is asking, is that welcoming or should that change? Particularly, do we need this in urban areas more or less?
Yeah, and so, you know, it's just traditionally that has been how it is in parks and recreation. And again, I don't know that the way that we've always done things is the way that we need to do things. I'm in a way less intimidating uniform, right? But yet you still know that I'm representing an organization. And so as part of our efforts internally, we're looking at all of our rules and our policies and procedures and our appearances that have anything to do with visitor experience. And the uniform and the badge are definitely on that list of things. It commands a level of respect to be able to de-escalate situations, but I would argue that there are lots of different ways to get to respect and the uniform, so people know that you are somebody there that has an official responsibility, but it's high on our priority list of things to look at.
And just adding into that, I think we're having a larger conversation at the state enterprise level about creating those pipelines for more diverse staff to engage and work for the state. There are lots of opportunities to work for natural resource agencies in particular, and separate conversations are kind of taking place to figure out what is the pipeline that we can start building now so that people can see that this is an opportunity for them.
Okay. I would just add real briefly that the sort of outreach and recruitment that needs to happen is relationship based. As you know, the old adage, you do things the same way, you get the same results. So just sending out announcements obviously isn't working. And so there needs to be relationships established with the communities and leadership in the communities that you would like to encourage to have, apply to positions. And that's a gradual process, and it takes some time, but it needs to start with trust building, people feeling comfortable with the agencies.
Mhm. Chad, how do any of those questions
another
strike
question?
you? Any other responses from you, Chad?
Yeah, well, I was just about to speak to what Greg was actually speaking to, but the whole trust and that trust is a big deal when it comes to BIPOC, because you're dealing with culture and when you look at the culture and look at the BIPOC, we celebrate different. African Americans celebrate different being Hispanic, and same thing with Asian. And there's a different layer of dialogue and communication and how we approach the woods, how we approach the trails, and I think, I can just speak from like from Love is King is, we are embarking on something new, which is creating these heritage events. And that is centered around developing a relationship and developing that trust. And we're layering that into this mix with storytelling. And we're layering it in with culture and music. And, we're creating this really interesting experience where BIPOC, whether you're Asian, African-American, Hispanic, we are tailoring this experience according to your culture into the outdoors. And so that bridge is established where you can easily walk across that bridge. But the beautiful thing about this is the partnerships that Love is King is creating, government, nonprofit, corporate, we're bringing that into the same space. And so now we are collectively coming together and creating a really interesting experience, a healthy experience for BIPOC to be experienced. And they're making these connections to government, connections to corporate, connections to nonprofit, all at the same time, where they're realizing that these are allies, these are people who are supporting, et cetera. And we're here to make the space welcome, access, and safety for everyone, basically, And so we live more in that world of developing that trust, developing those relationships, bring that into our wild spaces.
Oh, that's so well said, Chad. And, following a year where the breakdown of public trust was so great here in the state and the nation, this is a key moment, right? To figure out how we collectively, as state agencies, as nonprofits, as environmental professionals, as legal professionals, as state officials, how we think about creating more free spaces and safe spaces for Oregonians to roam in nature. And I often think of how Travel Oregon is working tremendously well in a post-COVID era, driving tourism into the state and outdoor tourism, and how this is a tremendous opportunity for us as Oregonians to show the world and to show tourists what it means for us to recover from the social tensions and traumas we've experienced as a state and as a region. Since our inception, yes, but really even in the last several years, we have become kind of a world stage in some ways for the conversation around racial equity. And so on behalf of Willamette River Network and our founding foundation, Meyer Memorial Trust, I just want to say this was an excellent panel. Thank you all so much for your reflections. Thank you, Greg, for moderating an excellent discussion on the freedom to roam in nature that we want to catalyze here in Oregon. I want to draw your attention to a few events that are coming up in honor of Black History Month. Chad Brown just mentioned some of the heritage events that Love is King is going to be putting on today at 3 p.m. They are having an experience with Dr. Mamie Parker, who is an alum of the University of Arkansas and the first ever regional director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. This event will be hosted on Instagram. And if you go to the Instagram channel, Native Fish Society, the Instagram channel, Native Fish Society at 3 p.m., that will be live streaming. And that's today at 3 p.m. Also this Sunday, they are having an experience in Forest Park. That experience will be at 10 a.m. and it will be focused around introducing James Edward Mills, a 2014 fellow of the Mountain and Wilderness Writing Program at the Banff Center in Alberta, Canada. He's a freelance journalist. This event will take place in a socially distanced way in Forest Park, February 28th. And Chad, where exactly will they be meeting at 10 a.m. this Sunday for this event?
I'm not in front. I'm sorry. The information is on the link. I apologize.
Oh, okay. And we put the link in the site there in the chat, so you can find that link. Also, we're really excited about this SB 289 bill that Amira Streeter was discussing. If you're interested in signing that bill and sending it in, we would be thrilled for you to do that. There is a sample letter of support and instructions to send it in that we have just placed in the chat. You'll see it there in the resources. And yes, again, thank you so much, everyone, for your attendance. Thank you, panelists. And thank you, Greg, for moderating such an excellent event. Black History Month, we honor those who have so much to be honored for, really. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a good rest of your weekend. Cheers, and goodbye.